Jesus, we thank you. And Jesus, in this moment, we declare that your name is worthy. We declare that your name is worthy. We can say it 1,000 times over, God, but we mean it more with every breath we take, that your name is worthy. That atmospheres are changed at the mention of your name. That mountains can move, demons can flee at the mention of your name. Fear can be cast out, shackles can be torn off at the mention of your name. Lives can be changed at the mention of your name. Addictions can be broken at the mention of your name. Your name is worthy and your name is mighty. So God, we thank you for that. In your name we pray. Amen. You may be seated. Can we get a hand clap real quick for our worship band? They did amazing this morning. Yes, they did absolutely amazing. Thank you, guys. Thank you, thank you. So, pretty ugly people. This is a sermon series that we are actually in the middle of with our youth group on Wednesday nights, Pretty Ugly People. And as I was preparing at the beginning of this week for Wednesday night and knowing that I was speaking on Sunday, I just really began to feel that what I was preparing for Wednesday was also for Sunday, because what I was preparing, what we're teaching the youth students right now is not just when you're in middle school, not just when you're in high school, but it's applicable to every age. It's applicable to every stage of life. And it's not just something that middle schoolers and high schoolers need to learn. It's something that we, even the seasoned ones in this room, need to be reminded of. And so this sermon series is titled Pretty Ugly People, and it's all about taking a look at what's on the inside rather than what's on the outside. Because a lot of times we're pretty on the outside, but we're ugly on the inside because we focus too much on what the world thinks we look like or what we look like. And so we're going to start off with Proverbs chapter 11. That's going to kind of set the tone for our time together this morning, and it's going to kind of kick us off. And if you're taking notes, I don't do this very often. I'm not one to title my sermons a lot. I just go based on what the sermon series is that I'm doing at that time. But this sermon title today, if you're taking notes, is called Angels on the Inside. Angels on the Inside, as opposed to the fantastic Danny Glover movie, Angels in the Outfield. But angels on the inside. And so Proverbs chapter 11, verse 22 is where we're going to start. And it says, like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman who shows no discretion. Now, one thing realtors talk about all the time when people are buying homes is curb appeal, right? When people are selling homes, they're like, listen, make sure your front of your house looks good, make sure your yard looks good. Curb appeal is a very important thing. I'm sure if you're selling your house right now, you can load up YouTube and get on there and find an HGTV video, 15 ways to improve your curb appeal, and it'll help you a lot. But curb appeal is something that's very important, and actually, studies have been done that show that people who are buying houses, when they're coming to a house to look at it, if they want to purchase it, they'll decide before they ever get out of their car if they want to enter the house or if they want to go to the next one based on the curb appeal. Now, I know it's a little different in today's day and age. You know, you got apps and websites, and you can see the entire house before you ever get there in person. But the same rule still applies. They can scroll through the first 3 to 4 pictures, and if they don't like what they see on the outside, they can swipe to the next house. But if they like it, then they can go see it in person. So the same rule still applies. But curb appeal is very, very important, but let's just agree right now that it's not the most important thing when you're selling a house. It's very important, but it's not the most important thing because you can't tell from the curb if the house has got mold, if the plumbing's good or bad, if there's stains in the carpet, if there's rusty pipes, if there's, a random hole in the wall or insect infestation. You can't tell any of that from the curb. The only thing you can tell is the outside. So yeah, the outside may look good, but the inside's a whole different story, or vice versa. And this message this morning is an attempt to get better at looking deeper, beyond just the facade, beyond just the surface. Because things that are only skin deep are ultimately things that you can't keep. I'll say that one more time. Things that are only skin deep are things that you ultimately can't keep. And I think that's very important. And we have to learn to do some relational and some personal due diligence in our lives to figure out what's really going on. Because there's a true deceptiveness to beauty on the outside. There's a true deceptiveness to beauty. I mean, in fact, the Bible says that clearly. It says that beauty is deceptive. In Proverbs 31:30, it says, "Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised." Now, this message this morning is not to shame physically beautiful people. I'm proud of you. That's great. I wish I was right there with you. It's not to shame beautifully physical people or physically beautiful people. But this is a message this morning. And while that's fantastic to be beautiful, don't get me wrong, it's amazing. But at the end of the day, it's passing away for all of us day by day. I mean, that's just how it is. But what's truly important isn't what can be seen with the eyes, isn't what can be posted and get shares or get likes. That's not what's important. What's truly important is what's inward, what's on the inside. A man, a woman of God who fears the Lord, who is reverent to the Lord, is something to be praised, is something to be cherished, because a lot of times in today's world, that's hard to come by. So, I'm sure you guys know the saying, all that's glitter isn't gold. And also, that we know that to judge a book by its cover is most of the time, a mistake that brings huge consequences. And I know we've all been in that position before, and subconsciously, we still do it all the time. I mean, for instance, when you see a book, like the book cover, you're strolling, you could scroll, but strolling through a bookstore or a public library or wherever you're at, and you look at the book covers before you see what's inside. If it interests you, then, you may pick it up. And same with a movie poster. If book covers or movie posters look intriguing, that's amazing. But we can't get hung up on that, because the reality is the cover or the poster doesn't mean anything if what's inside isn't meaningful. You're going to put the book back down. You're going to say, "Oh, don't go see that movie because it was bad." It doesn't matter how cool it looks if what's on the inside isn't valuable, it isn't powerful, it isn't vulnerable, it doesn't add value, it doesn't add life. You're not going to recommend it to anybody. You're going to put it back down and recommend that people don't go see that movie or go read that book. And the same is true in relationships. The same is true in relationships. Physical beauty, Proverbs is saying, is like a book cover. Okay, great. Awesome. Fantastic. You're beautiful. But what's on the inside? What is deeper? What makes you tick? What makes you move? What matters to you? What's something that you're willing to disregard everything else for in life, drop everything for in life? Are you willing to help somebody? Like, what's on the inside? And in seasons of dating, the same is true. And marriage, for that matter, the same is true. Our responsibility is to do some serious due diligence before you ever end up in a situation where you have been deceived by someone's outer appearance. Whether that's a colleague, whether that's a friend, whether that's a partner, like a romantic partner, a husband or a wife, or a boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever it is, same rule applies throughout. Beauty, wealth, yeah, they may go a long way in society, but at the end of the day, it's going to fade away. At the end of the day, it's fleeting. These are things that one day will pass away, when in reality, the inside, our spirit, our soul, those are things that are going to carry us and dictate our eternity. Right? I mean, for instance, I forgot again. I did this on Wednesday night, and I absolutely forgot again. There's a man by the name of Francis Chan. And he has a sermon where he's talking about heaven, where he's talking about eternity. And he has a rope on stage. So just imagine a rope going from this speaker to this speaker over here, right? Imagine a rope, like a tug-of-war rope or whatever kind of rope you want to imagine. Imagine a rope from here to there. And he has a piece of tape on the rope, but he talks about how if this is the time span of us as humans, if this is like our timeline, then our time on earth is about this long. That's eternity. So what we do in this short time dictates where we go during this time. So you can look beautiful here, but your surroundings may not be very beautiful when you're over here if you don't take care of what's on the inside right here. You can be rich, you can wear the best clothes, you can have the most friends, but it's not going to matter at the end of the day because, surprise, surprise, you didn't take care of the inside. So we have to do some due diligence, just like when you're buying a house. For instance, I know most people in here know this, but when you're, buying a house, you have an inspection done, you have an appraisal done, you want them to tell you what's wrong, how much the house is actually worth, so you're not getting scammed a ton of money, because nobody wants to pay more than what they have to right now, right? So you have an inspection and an appraisal done, but what's the neighborhood like on Friday night at 10 p.m. at the prospective house? Because the inspection ain't going to tell you that your neighbor 2 doors down invites 85 people over at Friday night at 10 p.m. The music gets really loud, and then you and your children can't sleep all Friday night, every single Friday night. Inspection's not going to tell you that. The inspection's just going to say, yeah, you got some stains in the carpet, but, holds up pretty nice. The inspection's not going to tell you that, so you have to dig deeper. You have to do your own homework. And it's the same way in relationships. It's the exact same. That's the point of the friendship phase before you go into dating. That's the point of talking to someone, a colleague at work, before you're like, hey, you guys, your family want to go out to eat with our family? Like, you have to do some due diligence. You have to do your homework. You have to find out who this person is. Because during that time, the main question you're trying to figure out is, who are you? Yeah, I see your face. I see the clothes you wear, the car you drive, but who are you? And speaking of the dating phase, some of y'all in this room this morning may be in, or may have been, or for a while, been in the phase of, well, I'm single and I'm lonely. Been that way for a while, don't see it changing. I'm single and I'm lonely, and to be honest, I'm tempted to lower my standards because I don't feel like what I deserve I can achieve. But let me tell you this morning, let me encourage you, that's incorrect. God will always give you more than what you feel like you deserve. God isn't a halfway God. He's not a minute God. He doesn't give a little and then take a lot. You deserve more than that. But on the other hand, if you are single and lonely, let me just encourage you also that there's a lot of lonely married people in this world. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of lonely married people, and the Bible actually says that it is better to dwell on the roof of a home than to live in a house with a contentious person. That's not me, that's the Bible. But the Bible says it's better to live on a rooftop than to dwell in a home with a contentious person. So there's a lot of people who end up living in a situation where they're frustrated, where they're angry. But all of this could have been avoided if they would have just talked and brought to the surface what they are inside before they ever went further. And the same is true with friendships. We can get down the road a few months, a few years, and figure out that we have habits from this person that we do not like. But you were too blind to see what they were like on the inside, and you didn't do your homework, you didn't do the responsibility of doing your due diligence, and now you're in a place where you have to take about 6 steps back and have a hard conversation with someone, being like, hey, we're going to need to take some time, or being like, hey, what you're doing is not right. Because the same is true in dating and in friendships, wherever you're at in life, and even in marriage. You may develop some habits that, down the road you're like, when did this start happening? How did we get here? Like, you ain't putting the toilet seat down. Since when? I mean, that's a very small one, but, I promise I put the toilet seat down. I have not been yelled at for that yet. So, before we get into this friendship, before we get into this dating phase with people, what are we looking for in the due diligence phase? What are you looking for? You're asking the question, who are you, but what are you actually looking for? Well, to be honest, I would say that we're looking for depth. We're looking for more than just what's on the surface. We're looking for things that, what they believe in, you don't have to ask them what their habits are. Like, so, what's your normal day of eating? And you don't have to go that, not that in depth, but what's on the inside, right? Because 2 Corinthians 4:16, it says, therefore, we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. And once again, the Bible's telling us, hey, look, outwardly, you were cute as a baby, and you're still good looking, but the farther you go, the more it's fading away. The more the outward's fading away. And I'll be honest, I've seen it within my grandparents, within my family, that when they get older, they start caring less and less and less what clothes they wear. They start caring less and less what people think about them. They don't care anymore. They are past the stage of caring. But at the end of the day, to some extent, we should all be like that. We shouldn't care what people think. The outward may not be cool to them, may not look good to them, but oh well, because the inside is right with Jesus. The inside is jumping for joy and praying for people. The inside has that relationship with God. Because it doesn't matter what the outward appearance is. So we're looking for depth, right? Paul put it this way. He said, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. These are the fruits of the Spirit. And these, when you see these in people, when you're, doing your homework, doing your due diligence, getting to know someone, what's on the inside, these qualities are things that will only get better. These qualities are things that will blossom. These qualities are things that will push you to God, will push you to become a better person. But if it's any of the opposite, well, guess what? It's going to pull you the opposite direction. These are the things that we're looking for. And I'm going to let this one marinate for a little bit. There is a danger to having the wrong people at the key seats at the table of your life. Right? There's a grave danger when that happens. When you let someone who doesn't have your best interest in mind, when you let someone who, quite honestly, doesn't have the right beliefs or just isn't a good person because they're angry, they have a lot of hatred. When you let someone like that sit at a key seat at a table of your life, they're not speaking life to you. They're not pushing you to grow the fruits of the Spirit. They're not pushing you to follow after God, to chase after God. Instead of pushing towards God, they're pulling you away from God, whether you know it or not, whether they're intentionally doing it or not. It's happening. Because the people we go to, the people we run to, the people we have communication with every day, those are the people at the key seats of your table. Those are the people that help you steer life. Those are the people that help you walk the path of life. And when you have someone answering questions or in constant communication with you, someone who's always when you're like, hey, how was your day? You're like, oh, well, wasn't a very good one. Guess we'll go through all this again tomorrow. And then they say it's the same thing for the next 6 days. It kind of weighs on you a little bit. You're like, man, why are you always sad? Why are you always down? What's wrong? Just that little thing is something that can impact you tremendously. And even more so than that, more so than my mouth, the Bible says in 1 Corinthians, which is what my life group's based after this semester, bad company corrupts good character. So if you continuously, day after day, surround yourself with bad company, what you once were will no longer be, and not in a good way. Because the Bible isn't saying here, if you surround yourself with bad company, may happen. No. The Bible is saying when you do, it's going to happen. The only question is to what extent? To what extent are you going to let it continue? To what extent will you finally realize that, wait a second, I am in the wrong group of people right now. I am in the wrong atmosphere right now. Bad company corrupts good character. And you're going to be influenced by those people who sit at your table. But there's one relationship for everyone that influences you more than any other relationship. And men, I'm not talking about the one with your mama. I'm talking about your romantic partner, your husband, your wife. That is going to impact your decisions. It's going to impact your day. It's going to impact your life more so than any other relationship you have, person to person. And if it doesn't, maybe you need to have a conversation, because it should. I know I'm up here married a year last Sunday, and I'm telling you about marriage, but listen, I've learned a thing or two watching my great-grandparents who were married for 85 years. I've learned a thing or two. And you know, the people we bring into our lives, the people we have communion with, will influence our lives. The author Thomas Hobbes put it this way: hell is truth seen too late. Hell is truth seen too late. And God has so much better for you, and that's why he warned you ahead of time. Not until after the fact when you've been through it, and then you're like, oh, well, would have been nice to know that earlier. He warned you before you were ever born. He knew, and he warned you. And so it's our responsibility to do our due diligence, knowing that charm and beauty are deceitful and deceptive, so that we don't end up in a dangerous situation that God does not want us to be in. At the end of the day, it's on us to figure out who this person is before we, quote unquote, get in bed with them and figure out that, whoa, you are not who I thought you were. Well, maybe on them because they deceived you, but also it's kind of on you because you didn't figure out who they were. You just jumped. So it's important to know that all that's glitter isn't gold, because what you might not describe as physically beautiful, as outwardly beautiful, might be inwardly phenomenal. I mean, when you look at someone and you're like, well, their appearance isn't striking by any means, but what about the inside? Because I guarantee you they can teach you a few things about the Lord. Because what you may not see as outwardly beautiful may be inwardly phenomenal. But you may never get the chance to understand that if you just pass by on the looks that you see. If you pass by on the vibe that they give off. If you automatically write them off. And so what do I mean by that? Some people that might not be on your rigid standard list that you've composed, I mean, probably in part due to because of what society says is beautiful. But that list that you've composed of what you're looking for, you may forget when you're in that beauty comes in all shapes and sizes and races and ethnicities. That beauty isn't determined by just what's on the outside, but beauty is determined by what's on the inside. And this isn't also, newsflash, this isn't just for your relationships with other people, it's for your relationship with yourself. For you to look in the mirror and understand that what you see in that mirror at the end of the day is beautiful because God made you in his image, each and every one of you in this room. But it is not the end-all, be-all. In fact, it doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of who you truly are, of what you were truly meant to do. Because I know that looking in the mirror and speaking life over yourself and saying, listen, you are beautiful, you are amazing. Doing that is something that, I'm getting in my youth preaching, it's something that the youth definitely needs to hear and definitely needs to understand that is not okay, but same with the adults. Same with the grown people of the world. So, Hebrews 13, verse 2. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. So when I was preparing this week, I was reminded of this story in Genesis, which is exactly what this, or two stories in Genesis, which is what this verse is talking about. And so in Genesis, there's two different stories that have the same outcome, but two totally separate people, Abraham and Lot. Two different people, Two different stories, same outcome. So in the Old Testament, when you were going on a journey, when you were traveling, you needed to stop in a town overnight because you weren't going to travel at night. They didn't have street lights at that point. You weren't going to travel at night. So what you would do is, if you were the one traveling, you would sit by the gate that entered the city. You would sit by the gate. You and whoever you were traveling with would sit by the gate that entered the city. And the custom of that time was people who lived in that city, when they're taking their nightly stroll or whatever they happen to be doing, when they walk past the gate, the custom was to offer someone a room in their house. Now, they would, barter and be like, you have this many people, you can have this room, and you can stay there tonight, and it'll be this much money. Or it'll be, a loaf of bread or whatever. They would barter, and you would pay for it. But you would stay in that person's home. They didn't have Motel 6s or Holiday Inns or, get off on the exit 45 and there's a Holiday Inn right around the corner. No, they would sit at the gate of the city and hope that someone wouldn't judge them by how they looked, but would come up to them and say, hey, I have a room for you. If you're willing to pay me this much, you can stay here tonight. And so it was basically a modern-day Airbnb. That's what it was back in the Old Testament. This was their version of Airbnb. But you could actually let someone stay in your home if you agreed on the length they would stay there, the price, yada, yada, yada. People could stay in your home, and that was the custom of that time. So on two different occasions, Abraham and Lot did this. They entertained two strangers. They went up and said, hey, listen, two different people. They were like, hey, I'll let you stay in my house tonight for this much, then tomorrow you'll be on your way. But the strangers turned out to be angels carrying out a mission on earth from God. The two strangers that they invited in their house turned out to be angels. And Abraham and Lot would have never experienced this if they judged on the fact of, oh, well, you're a stranger. You're a person that doesn't look like a lot. So I'm just going to keep going. I'm not going to offer my house. I'm going to be selfish tonight. I'm going to want the house to myself. They would have never known that if they just judged on what was on the outside. But once they accepted the person, once they started to get to know the person, they realized that the inside was supernatural. So all I'm trying to say is, when you take off the shackles of culture and you actually stand there and say to God, God, please let me see people the way that you see them. Let me see what's going on the inside, rather than just my eyes seeing what's going on the outside. Then you will be able to begin to see that people who may not fit in a cultural norm may be pursuing God harder than you thought was possible. So, everybody's heard the saying, obviously I said it earlier, don't judge a book by its cover, and we all know, listen, I learned this, and I'm not joking. I learned this, my first job when I was 16, I worked at Chick-fil-A. I was a cook, so I wasn't the face in the front being like, my pleasure. I was the cook, so people were eating delicious food and having extra nuggets every time they ordered. Because, when you find extra nuggets in your Chick-fil-A nuggets, you're like, wow, this is a great day. So putting extra nuggets in people's food. But when I was training for the job, when I was watching the videos and all that kind of stuff, one thing that they emphasized, it was an entire chapter. And this is truly one of the things that I think makes Chick-fil-A different. There was an entire chapter. It was like 2 whole days, like 2 8-hour shifts. I was in there like learning things, right? And one day, one entire chapter, it took me like 45 minutes, was all about understanding that every single person who comes through the drive-thru, every single person who orders in the store has a story. That every single person is dealing with something on the inside, so to treat them with the utmost respect, because you're not sure. You don't know what's going on in their lives. They may have just come from a doctor's appointment where they got the news that they had cancer. They may have just come from the courthouse where they lost custody of their kid. You don't know, so treat them with respect. Treat them like you would your parents. Treat them like you would your family, because everybody's got a story. And if Chick-fil-A could teach their employees that, then the church can definitely teach its congregation that, right? If the Chick-fil-A employees can understand that everyone has a story, then we can too. So when you're looking at people, when you're doing your due diligence, when you're finding out who these people are, don't start with charm and acceptance by society. Don't let that be the first thing you see. Try looking on the inside. Start with characteristics of someone who has a great soul, someone who is kind, someone who is a generous person, who's steadfast, someone who says what they're going to do and then carries it out. Because beauty is great and it is a gift while it lasts. But at the end of the day, let's just be kind. Let's be respectful. Let's figure out what's hurting on the inside, what's rejoicing on the inside. And forget about the fact that someone may look totally different than you. They may have tattoos covering them from head to foot. They may have huge earrings. I don't know. I'm just describing a person that when I was younger in church, they'd be like, they're not safe. Stay away from them. So don't judge. Do not judge. Listen, this isn't a personal testimony. This is just something. The tattoos I have, they mean so much to me. And if you want to know, I'll tell you all about them. They mean so much to me. But one thing that I love, one thing that I absolutely love about the fact that I have tattoos and that I'm a pastor is because when I tell people that, they look directly at my tattoos every time I tell them. They're like, you're a pastor? Like, you work at a church? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, because it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter if you have tattoos. It doesn't matter if you have earrings. It doesn't matter what you look like. Because if the inside of you is pursuing God, if the inside of you is rejoicing for God, if the inside of you is a pure person who has gentleness and faithfulness and is steadfast, that's all that matters. And I love the fact that in some sort of way I can be a physical embodiment of that, but that's all of us too. That's every single one of us. Because I truly believe that there are some people in each and every one of y'all's lives in here. There are some people that God is wanting you to push a little deeper. God is wanting you to dig a little more, to get to know them just a little bit more. Maybe you've been neglecting them. Maybe you've just been having surface conversations with them. But I truly believe that in every one of our lives in here, there's that one person or that whole group of people that may not be what they seem from the curb. I mean, for instance, take Jesus. Take Jesus. Jesus obviously was fully man and fully God. But what did he look like in person? What did he resemble in person? Now, I can't tell you for sure, but I can tell you two things. That he wasn't. He wasn't white, and he wasn't American. And that's just facts. He wasn't either of those things. I can't tell you exactly what it looked like down to the T, but there is one physical description that we have of Jesus. One. And it's in a prophecy from the book of Isaiah. This prophecy is about the cross and about Jesus dying surrounded by rich people, mocking him and all this stuff. But it comes from the book of Isaiah in a prophecy that was made way before Jesus ever stepped on this earth. So Isaiah 53 verse 2 says, he grew up before him like a tender shoot and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. So what was Jesus like physically? Without beauty, without majesty, physical majesty, without physical beauty, nothing in his appearance suggested desire. In one translation, it says that he didn't inspire a double take. He was unimpressive on the outside, but on the inside, he was God. On the outside, he may not have been the best looking, he may not have won a beauty pageant, but on the inside, he was raising the dead, he was moving mountains, he was performing miracles. So it doesn't matter what you look like on the outside. It doesn't matter how society views you. It doesn't matter if you're not accepted by the world. What's the power inside? What's the relationship inside? Because culture will put the pressure on us to lower our standards of what we're looking for on the inside based on the beauty of someone on the outside. Culture will say, oh, that's a beautiful person, but they party a lot. But you'd be lucky to be with that person because they're a good-looking person and they're famous. And so you're like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. And then it just leads you down a road, leads you down a path that you didn't want to be, and you don't know how you got there. Culture will tell you, hey, this person's great, so you become friends with them. This person's well-known, they're well-connected. But there's nothing but malice and anger in their heart. And you didn't realize because you didn't dig deep enough. So I'm suggesting that we absolutely flip that script on its head. And we began to raise the standard of what we look for on the inside and not put so much emphasis on what they look like on the outside. And when we really believe that God is raising the standard of looking for the inner beauty, then we may be able to see some angels within. So how will we act? How will we live if we truly believe that every single person was made in the image of God and they are immortal beings that are either ending up in heaven or ending up in hell? How are we going to react? How are we going to act? How are we going to treat others? Because I believe if we really put that in perspective, there's not going to be any flippancy in conversation. There's not going to be any superiority. But there will be empathy. And we'll try to connect and see people for who they really are. We'll try to relate to people and be fully present and engaged when we're with them. Then we may actually begin to believe that God can use us to help them release their angel on the inside. Every single person sitting in this room has angels within, has angels around, has angels surrounding each and every one of us. But as humans who live on this earth, who live here just about this much, trust me, I don't really think you're going to care what your hair looked like if you're in hell for eternity. I don't really think you'll be thinking about that. Take care of the spiritual. Take care of the inside. Don't judge people based on what they're wearing, based on what car they drive, based on where they live, whether they have a home or whether they don't. Because everybody has a story. Everybody's made bad decisions. Some may be worse than others. But if you can look past the physical, if you can look past the exterior, and realize that everything that you see from the curb isn't the whole story, and you do some homework and you dig a little deeper and you look for some depth, you may realize that this person is not only pursuing God, but they're going to help you in your pursuit of Him as well. Or you may realize that you can help them in their pursuit. You can help them release that angel on the inside. So this morning and throughout this week, don't lose sight of that. Don't forget that everything is not as it seems on the outside. All that's glitter isn't gold, and to not judge a book by its cover. To understand that they may be strangers on the outside, but on the inside, there may be angels. So if you bow your heads, God, we just come to you this morning. And God, we just pause. We just pause. We put everything else in life on hold. And we sit in your presence a little longer. We sit in communion with you a little longer. God, I pray that it is instilled in our hearts to understand that on the inside is the true beauty. That on the outside, everything can be put together, but on the inside, it may be falling apart. So God, I pray right now that you continue to push us to not only clean up our inside and our spirit, but God, to help others do the same, to dig a little deeper and to not just rush in. To not judge at first glance, to not brush off at first sight, but to understand that everyone has a story, to understand that they are in a different place in life, but the inside, the spiritualness of who they are is what really matters. God, that we're all immortal beings in your name, made in your image. To not interact with someone in a way that is flippant or superior or smug, but to understand that when we are talking and communing and conversating with other people, that we have an impact on their eternity. So God, I just pray this morning as everyone goes from here that there is safety upon them, that there is discernment, that there is favor. People in-house today and people watching online, God, I pray that your Spirit is with them and that it guides them, and that they are reminded of your word, of your presence. In your name we pray. Amen. So, next Sunday, Pastor Chris will be back. Things will be as normal. It is Father's Day, right? Father's Day. Pastor Charlotte is speaking next week. Father's Day. Sorry. Okay. Father's Day. So, dads, make sure you're here. I don't know if this includes me because Abby's pregnant. We don't really have the kid yet, but I mean, hey, I'll take it. My first Father's Day. So, hey, if you didn't know, Abby's pregnant. I just kind of sprung that out there. I said it last week, but if you weren't able to be here, we are having a child. So, anyways, we love every single one of you. On your way out as you exit this morning, please don't forget, tithe boxes are in the lobby. You can give there to the number on the screen, or there is a QR code on the tithe boxes. You can scan it, and it'll take you directly to the link, so it's a little bit easier to give. But we thank you in your giving this morning. We thank you for being faithful to the Lord and to the Lord's kingdom. So we love you guys. Wednesday, we have things for all ages of kids. And we'll see you back here next week. Have an amazing week. We love you guys.